It was a stormy night when Emma found herself driving down the old winding road on the outskirts of town. She had taken this route hundreds of times, but tonight felt different. The rain lashed against the windshield in violent waves, and the sky flickered with flashes of lightning. She glanced at her phone, trying to call her husband, Mark, to tell him she was running late, but no signal. The road was desolate, empty, and the only sound she could hear was the rhythmic tapping of rain. She had always hated this road at night. The dense woods on both sides, the occasional rustling of leaves, the distant howls of wolves. It all sent a shiver down her spine. But she had to get home. Mark had been calling her, and she didn't want him to worry. Just a few more miles, she thought. As she rounded a sharp bend, Emma spotted something in the distance, a figure, standing alone on the side of the road. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't unusual for people to break down here, but this person seemed different. They were just standing there, unmoving, in the pouring rain. Emma slowed her car and rolled down the window a little. "Are you okay?" she called out, but the figure didn't respond. Suddenly, the person turned their head and Emma froze. Their eyes, black as coal, were unnaturally wide, unblinking. She couldn't look away. There was something wrong. Something was terribly wrong. She slammed the window back up, heart racing, and sped off, not daring to look back. The next few miles felt endless, the storm growing more violent, her nerves fraying. She could still feel the weight of those dark eyes on her. After what felt like an eternity, Emma finally reached her house. She pulled into the driveway, hurriedly exiting the car, her heart still pounding from the encounter. She walked inside, hoping to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. Mark was sitting in the living room, his face pale and drawn. His eyes were fixed on the TV screen, but it was turned off. He didn't seem to notice her walk in. "Mark?" she called out, but he didn't react. She stepped closer and shook his shoulder, trying to snap him out of whatever trance he was in. His head tilted slowly to one side, and he muttered in a low, almost inhuman voice. "They're here." Emma recoiled in shock. "What do you mean?" "Mark, snap out of it." But his lips only repeated those chilling words over and over. "They're here." Suddenly the house seemed colder. The lights flickered, and a strange sound filled the air, soft, like the whisper of something moving through the walls. Emma's skin prickled with unease. The shadows. That night, Emma tried to sleep, but it was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, made her jump. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling as if something was watching her. She could hear whispers, distant at first, but growing louder, like the voices of a crowd just beyond the walls. At one point, she could have sworn she saw something in the corner of her room. A shadow, dark and moving, with no clear shape or form. She blinked, and it was gone. A loud bang echoed through the house, followed by a shrill screech. Emma bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding. She grabbed her phone to call Mark, but his phone was dead. She needed to find him. The house felt wrong now. Every room she entered was colder than the last, the shadows longer and more pronounced. She walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing eerily. The whispers followed her, soft and maddening. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if the house itself were alive, feeding off her fear. Then, in the dim light of the hallway, Emma noticed something. A door she had never seen before. It was tucked behind a large bookshelf, hidden from view. The door was old, made of dark wood and covered in dust. Her breath caught in her throat. There was something about it, something pulling her toward it. She reached for the handle and turned it. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. Without thinking, Emma stepped down, her hand gripping the cold metal railing. Each step creaked under her weight, and the air grew heavier with each passing second. She reached the bottom, and what she saw there sent a chill so deep into her bones that she thought she might freeze. The truth. The basement was filled with old furniture, broken and covered in sheets, but it wasn't the furniture that caught her attention. It was the walls, covered in strange, cryptic symbols, drawn in what looked like blood. and in the center of the room, lying motionless, was Mark. Emma rushed to him, but as she touched his shoulder, his eyes snapped open, black as night. His mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, and he whispered, "You shouldn't have come down here, Emma." Before she could react, the shadows in the corners of the room began to stir. Figures emerged, tall and thin, with hollow eyes and twisted lips. The whispers grew louder, frantic, and the temperature in the room dropped to freezing. Mark stood up, his body jerking unnaturally, as if controlled by some invisible force. "They are here," he repeated, his voice no longer his own. And then the shadows lunged. The next morning, the storm had passed, and the sun rose over a quiet town. Neighbors passing by Emma's house noticed that the lights were still on, but the door was ajar. They knocked, but no one answered. A few days later, the police were called. They found the house abandoned. There was no sign of Emma or Mark, nothing but the eerie silence and the strange symbols etched into the basement walls. The only clue left behind was a recording found on Emma's phone. It was a whisper, soft but unmistakable, repeating over and over, "They're here."